Louder, thank you. Hello. My name is Judith Dasbon. I'm the president of Bridgewater and District Trade Council. So thank you for everybody coming out. This is the International Day of Climate Action. This has been organised in conjunction with Young Somerset. I'm really excited that we've got young people here. Thank you. And you've lowered the average age right down. So thank you. Brilliant. So we've got Young Somerset, Green, sorry? Despite my youthful looks, I'm older than I seem. Green Jobs Alliance, and we've got, of course, the team from the engine room here, the home of Somerset Food. Somerset Food? Film!
Food and film, but yeah.
Yeah, okay. So just special welcome. Also, if we're live streaming on Zoom. If it's there now, I don't know, but welcome to everybody that's on Zoom, even now we're on the catch-up. I'm going to hand over to Phil for housekeeping and everything else that on the list. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. Yeah, so welcome everybody. Just on the housekeeping front, should there be a fire, there's no fire alarm practice scheduled for tonight. The main door is there. That will take you straight out. The assembly point is under the tree, directly outside. This door is not officially a fire exit, but it's ready to be pulled and opened. All you've got to do is pull it and go out that way, should you need to. There are also two further exits through the corridor by the cafe counter, should there be some kind of fire that somehow blocks those two. You can get out that way. So there's lots of ways out. The toilet's around the corner here, through that door just by the cafe again. And what else do I need to tell you about that? Food and drink you're aware of. Help yourself at different points, I think. Kate, is that the idea?
Yeah, and if anyone needs any help, just ask.
Okay. Thank you, Kate, for laying it all on. So, International Day of Climate Action is celebrated every year on October the 24th and is dedicated to the urgent need for action on climate change. And it's a reminder of, and I'm quoting what they say, the importance of preserving biodiversity, reducing carbon emissions, and working towards a greener and more sustainable future for all. So the format tonight is informal, and we will encourage questions at all times. Although we've also got quite a few speakers to.
Can you turn their phones off?
Oh.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, phones off. That's something I should have said in there. Thanks very much. Well, not just the silence, off. Silence, all right. Okay, cool. And so I lost my thread there. Yeah, the idea is that everybody gets involved, but we've got quite a few people to hear to talk. We're going to talk to us, and we're going to look at a film, and we're going to have an hour at the end, more or less, when we are kind of have a general discussion, and we've got music with friends from Seize the Day, which is wonderful. And so there'll be a kind of informal bit once we've heard what people have got to say. So there probably won't be too many questions or opportunities for them along the way. We're going to go forward now till about just after 8, where we'll take a short break about 8:15. So it'll be about 10 minutes. Then we'll do a part 2, which will take us up to just after 9. And then we'll go into this rather informal session where we'll have some music, obviously some drinks available, and hopefully we can have more of a discussion more informally among ourselves, and perhaps come up with some action points that we want to pursue. The idea of tonight is small but beautiful assembly of people, is that we're all making a commitment in a way, or we might wish to make a commitment to working together to create to obviate the kind of problems that we're facing already, just from the damage that's already been done to the environment. Even if we were to stop tomorrow, we'd still be cleaning it up for a long time. So we've got those things to deal with, but we also want to be at the same time building a just transition and building a kinder world. So we've got several really interesting people to talk to us tonight, including Tahir Latif from, I've lost him for a moment, there he is, from the Green Jobs Alliance, who's going to speak to us first. We have Francesca and team from Young Somerset. We have councillors Tim Mander and Kathy Pearce from Bridgewater Town Council. I've already mentioned the great musicians we've got, and we have joining us on Zoom at about 20 to 9, we have Gawain Little, who from the Federation, the National Federation of Trades Councils. The theme of the name of the event, as we know, is how green is your workplace. So that's a very specific thing about what people can do in their own lives to make a change. But the idea is that what it's also about tonight is tying it into the bigger picture. Because I think a lot of the time people feel, what's the point of doing recycling when people are just going on pumping oil and gas forevermore? But actually everything we do makes a contribution and is in the interests of that bigger picture that we want to keep sight of as we go forward. Because this is one of those problems that it's kind of existential, isn't it? It's almost too big to get our heads around. And so I think a lot of the time, or not, certainly speaking for myself, I kind of think, well, can I make a difference? And maybe, and I kind of got in my head this idea that maybe when things get really, really bad, then that'll be when I really step up. But actually, I think that day that I'm waiting for arguably has already been gone. I think things are already, sorry to say it, really, really bad. We're seeing collapse everywhere. We're all aware of it. People, even climate deniers, must feel it in their bones and in their DNA. They must know what's going on. But we don't know what to do about it. And that's where I take an interest as someone that's worked all my life in professional arts or community-based arts and media, that the storytelling comes in. So what's the story that we've got to tell that's going to motivate us to actually take action? I'm not sure we know what that story is. The story we've been told for the last 400 years, really, since the Enlightenment, the whole Descartesian thing of we are, somehow superior to nature, we're progressing civilization, that's what we believe in the so-called West, and that we are somehow going to conquer nature. We have to replace that narrative. That narrative is still going full strong. Everyone's still talking about growth, even though we know that we're on a hiding to nothing with it. Certainly in this country, there are countries out there who still suffering in general impoverishment, who could probably do with a bit of growth. But we in Europe, for sure, don't need it. It's the last thing we need. We need to find out how to degrow. I'm now getting into a rant, so I'm going to stop, and I'm going to introduce our first speaker. Here, that is from. Do you want to chair?
No, I'm okay. I might use this tool thing, actually.
Yeah, that's there for you. Yeah.
It's basically, that's all right, here's fine. It's basically, I'm too short, so when it's down there, I can't see it. So, thanks very much, Phil. I'm not sure I can match the kind of highbrow nature of some of that, some of those philosophical reflections. Well, firstly, thank you to everybody for inviting me to this event. It's a real pleasure, and it's fantastic when you can get to go around the country to different events, and you see that local organisations and communities. I mean, it just amazes me how they come together to to make the efforts to do their part in the climate struggle, do the things that are within the scope of our control. I've never ceased to be inspired by that, and, to really feel like, because sometimes out in the kind of everyday world, you can kind of feel quite despondent about it. But when you come to an event like this, you think, well, there are so many people who are actually committed, and just want to make those efforts and actually do that. And I know we're going to be hearing about some of those shortly. And I think it's right to pay tribute to those kind of efforts, not only here in Bridgewater, but across the whole country and beyond, in fact. When we throw around phrases like worker-led and local democratic control and things like that, it's exactly that kind of ability of local communities to come together for the common good is what we're talking about. And to me, picking up on some of the threads that Phil mentioned in his introduction, It only makes it more frustrating when we're doing our bit, parts that are within our control, and those that have the power to effect real change across, large swathes of our economy and our society can't seem to get their act together to do their bit. And in fact, far too often are actively working against us, preventing us from taking the steps that we need to defend our communities and our planet. There's that old adage that those who have the most feel they have the most to lose, and just look at all the current hoo-ha over VAT on private schools. I mean, how ridiculous is that? I'd say we all have something to gain from working together to secure the future of the planet, our communities, and the jobs that we need to get to that point. If you're a billionaire, you might feel you'd be losing something, but I'd say even that is arguable, that the world will be a better place for every single one of us. One thing we need to do is to dispel a myth that is too often used to divide us by making environmental campaigners feel that workers are an obstacle rather than comrades in the struggle for the climate. It makes workers think that climate groups don't care about jobs. Those positions do still exist in places, and we need to work on that. But it's becoming increasingly rare, and I'm glad to say that, because environmentalists and trade unionists alike recognise that saving the climate is not just about stopping things or closing them down. It's also about making new things instead. The environment and jobs are not opposites that are posed against one another, but two aspects of the same struggle. I mean, if preventing climate catastrophe, I don't mean to labour the point, but if it just meant standing around with your placards about closing something down, I understand that workers might resent that, because there's no thinking going on there. But I think we're all well aware by now that actually securing our long-term future involves an awful lot of work. That means jobs, that means workers, and that means trade unions. In the book, I don't know if people have seen it, Climate Jobs, produced by the Campaign Against Climate Change. I was one of the co-authors of that book. It explains how a truly progressive effort to combat climate change with real solution entails millions of jobs in this country alone, let alone globally. Those jobs are needed in every sector of our society: the transition to renewable energy, retrofitting millions of homes, production of low or zero carbon building materials, decarbonised transport system, and also a lot of areas that we don't often think about in these sort of terms, food and agriculture, land use, health services, the care sector, and of course education, because we need to do an awful lot of training, retraining and reskilling to have the workforce that's needed on that kind of scale. And to me, when you think about it in those sort of terms, the idea that workers should fear climate action, that to me is a fallacy. Every worker and every trade union should see supporting climate action and a just transition as a no-brainer, really, because it's those sort of jobs that are the lifeline by which their long-term job security will be assured. By contrast, the lifespan of jobs in fossil fuels, with the best will in the world, is finite and offers no assurances, and we see a dwindling workforce in those industries anyway, which kind of demonstrates that. The only thing fossil fuels do offer is the chance to fall off a cliff edge if we haven't made adequate provision for the future deployment of the workforce starting right now. The fact that many workers do feel trepidation about terms like just transition, some, not many, but some union leaders kind of promote the continuation of fossil fuels for as long as possible as a positive thing for reasons I understand, but which I think are misconceived. But I think it says more about the kind of world we've been living in for the last 40 to 50 years than it does about the urgency of the climate situation. Because let's face it, the world over that time period has been very kind to giant corporations, less so to working people. And those corporations, of course, use every power at their disposal to control the narrative so as to keep things as they are, even though it's to the detriment, and sometimes tragically so, of the overwhelming majority of the human race. They use and buy politicians, the press, TV channels and other media to spread disinformation and fear to protect their own interests and profits. And because they have the power to employ or not employ workers, and therefore to determine the fortunes or otherwise of whole communities, that disinformation is too easily bought into by people who have been rendered desperate by circumstances, but in reality, they stand to gain very little. too often it's a case of a bad employer being better than no employer because, well, at least they're an employer. Sometimes a community's future can seem to be tied to the success of the very employers who are actually attacking your jobs, pay, terms and conditions at the same time because no alternative is being presented. And when it comes to climate change, those kinds of choices have real world impacts. Communities suffering floods, wildfires, hurricanes, often with real human costs. Ideally, we should be against such developments, especially when the benefits for the majority of the population are barely perceptible. One such case in the news right now, and you may have differing views on this, which is absolutely fair enough, but carbon capture and storage. This is being sold as the answer to our climate problems and a potential jobs bonanza, when actually it's nothing of the sort. Carbon capture is being promoted and lobbied for very hard by the fossil fuel corporations for one reason only, to provide the justification for them to continue with a business that is destroying the planet. Not only is CCS unproven, rife with technical problems, effectively it doesn't work at anything like the kind of scale that would be needed, but also the envisaged solutions, using it in conjunction with hydrogen, would release potentially lethal levels of methane into the atmosphere, far more destructive than our current burning of oil and gas, in fact. The other option on the table is using CCS at gas-fired power stations. That would mean, because our gas reserves are running out, that would mean reliance on imported LNG, which is liquefied natural gas, and that's obtained by fracking. As for the jobs, these are mostly in the construction phase. So they build the facility and then those jobs won't exist. So it's a real short-term thing that you're being sold. Essentially, this is 22 billion of public money being sent on a project that the fossil fuel companies want. And this is preventing us from spending that money on expanding and developing the renewable energy infrastructure to provide cheap and efficient energy for our communities and the thousands of permanent long-term jobs that would go with that. And, it does make me laugh as well, because there's a really obvious argument that always comes to mind. If we continue to increase the proportion of our energy that comes from wind and solar, etc., as we've been doing, and it takes some 25 years to develop and perfect carbon capture. I just had these visions of someone in 2050 saying, "Eureka! We've solved carbon capture." And you're not emitting carbon anymore. Oh, okay. Yeah, what a waste of time. The real point of this is not to believe the greenwash you'll be subjected to about all these wonderful solutions, which by amazing coincidence allow the fossil fuel companies to continue operating because they say they'll have it sorted one day. In a similar sense, a tiny proportion of aeroplane flights, I'm just going back to my old days in my job, that would use so-called sustainable aviation fuels is being used to justify carrying on with massive levels of carbon emissions from all those private jet flights that the ultra-rich find so fulfilling. It's just absolutely bonkers. For the benefit of the overwhelming mass of ordinary people, we have to demand that our money, our efforts, our jobs are based around real solutions that actually benefit us in terms of cheap and reliable energy. And that then becomes the basis upon which we bring about a transformation for the better, the whole of our society, because every sector will be touched by those changes and will change in turn. This isn't just about our environment, as important as that is, but about social, economic and global justice as well. In a sane world where we treat a global emergency on the basis of its impact on people, not profit, we'd right now be doing the things that we need. Building a wholly renewables-based energy system, not wasting time and effort on carbon capture so that Shell and BP executives can realise their dividends. Thousands of jobs are needed in building the infrastructure, expanding the grid to cope and managing demand so all can benefit. We need a publicly owned, integrated transport system whose primary purpose is to make travel affordable and accessible for all. Getting people from A to B is the point, not making a profit. We need 1 million workers, it's estimated, to be trained and deployed to properly retrofit homes across the country, prevent the travesty of the heating or eating dilemma and the worry over winter fuel bills. We need to properly utilise our urban and rural spaces, growing more of our own food rather than transporting it across the globe, and improving our woefully neglected health and care services. For any government and I am coming to a close, Phil,
No,
for any government
great.
with even a moderate level of boldness, and you have to remember that we actually elect a government to make life better for us, not worse. I mean, that's the whole reason for having a government. I mean, there's no excuse not to be doing these things, because you'd be reinvigorating the economy and giving people hope and purpose. None of this is pie in the sky. It's just a case of, dare I say it, putting the needs of the many before the needs of the few. Our livelihoods, our communities, and our planet are all on the same side of that equation, and recognising that will start us on the path to getting it done. Building from the bottom up, it's inspiring events like this taking place across the country. That's how we start to make that happen. Thanks very much. Solidarity.
Thank you very much indeed, Tahir. That was great. And for me, I think the point you were making about the need for trade unions and workers' organisations and workers in general to work with the climate activists, consciously make that point and to work with them is so important right now, that it's not, there's a tendency to be in silo thinking. And actually we need to be, there was an RMT march I was on in Bristol not very long ago, where the XR people, the Extinction Rebellion people, appeared supporting the march. And I thought that was absolutely fantastic. But it needs to happen both ways round, and it needs to happen a lot more, because we're not in a position to kind of argue about niceties at this point. We need to all work together. So I think that was really, and there was a lot of really great information there. Thanks so much. And there'll be an opportunity to ask Tahir some questions right now, immediately, if there's anything urgent. No, that's absolutely fine. Thank you very much. The next thing up is a film. Dan, if we're going to run a film from that laptop onto this TV, and this is a film that Theo from Seize the Day suggested to us, and it's called COP26, which you'll remember happened in Glasgow in 2022, organising a fair hospitality city. I'm going to read you what I know about it, which is the film underlines the imperative for workers and trade unions to start having joint assemblies with the climate movement immediately. Actually, what I've just said in a much more coherent way, making plans for a just transition from below, and then coming up with a plan to implement them, a plan of action to implement them, not waiting for jobs that are under threat or jobs that are being taken away, but to act now. Unlike, for example, the workers of the GKN in Florence in Italy, who all lost their jobs. I know Theo knows quite a lot about that. Maybe we'll hear a little bit about that later. Not majorly, but just any anecdotal evidence would be great. I've got a real apology to make, is that when I read out who was speaking tonight, I left out Ryan Schroer, who's someone I've never met, but he's from Bridgewater College. He's the Just Transition rep for the UCU at Bridgewater College, and he's on the bill tonight as well. So looking forward to hearing from Ryan. We are in a position to go with the film, and I think it's down to me to hit play. Is it done? Yes. How do we get out? Get the sound sorted down.
Yes. Can you just turn the telly up? Does that work?
Always a good one.
The remote's by the laptop there.
Oh, yeah, that would help. The old standby.
Or
No,
over there, then the volume over there.
which one on the end at the back?
Sorry. Yeah, it's all right. It's the thing that we back to. I will be surprised. Yeah, Azerbaijan, you're right. You will receive a prize.
Claybank.
Okay, from the beginning of the film, yeah, correct.
And it wasn't as simple as this one. It's always working class communities and those in poverty that suffer the brunt of decisions taken by those in power. Once thriving communities in Glasgow, like Partick and Govan, are now at risk of being underwater by 2050. The town we are in just now, Clydebank, once a thriving working class community, is also at risk of flooding. Unite Hospitality are standing shoulder to shoulder with these communities in their struggle against being left behind by those in power. Through this conference, we hope to display just how our organising tactics have made Unite Hospitality Glasgow one of the biggest branches in Europe, and how the skills that we use can be applied to the struggle against climate change and promote a just transition for all workers.
Issues such as climate change might seem separate to our workplaces in hospitality and services, but I think unions can be and should be driving the change for real solutions. To tackle climate catastrophe, you can actually create an optimistic alternative and fighting for an actual just society.
We knew long ago that if we dug up fossil fuels and we burned them, they would trap more heat in the atmosphere. We knew it would destabilize our climate, that it would reduce food production and wipe out plant and animal species. What we didn't know was that the changes would happen so fast. Over the last 160,000 years, there were 2 ice ages and 2 warm periods, including the one that we're in now. Now, the change in ice age conditions where you had half a mile thick ice sheet sitting where you are now to the current warm period was just 100 parts per million in carbon dioxide concentrations. Today, we are now at around 413 parts per million, and it grows every year.
Capitalism creates climate change. 100 companies have been responsible for 70% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions since 1988. The world's richest 1% produce twice as many carbon emissions as the world's poorest 50.
We are told to change while their system of capitalism, of for-profit production, stays intact. A system that is not only destroying our environment and destabilizing our climate, but also one that was built off brutal colonization, slavery, dispossession, and oppression, all of which continues today. And that's why climate activists demand system change and climate justice. It's why we say that to deal with the climate crisis, we also have to deal with all the other problems that we are faced with, from housing, transport, and education to racism, sexism, ableism, homophobia, and transphobia. Everything has to change about how we get around, how we make the stuff we need, and how we live.
What do you want? Climate justice! What do you want now? What do we want? Climate justice! When do we want this? Now!
The same system which ensures that young people are pinned down and paid $4.65 an hour, the same system which fires and rehires people across the country, that steals tips and which wages war on precarious workers in the gig economy. That's what we mean when we call for solidarity between the labour movement and the climate movement.
In hospitality, obviously, during the pandemic, so many redundancies. My company tried to make 95% of the workforce redundant. We collectivised in our workplaces to prevent the redundancies and managed to hold them off. for a good few months and get people more for local. But now it's building bigger campaigns, including things like paid transport home after midnight, a real living wage, and like 100% tips policy, which we've had a massive win on recently as well.
COP brings together the figureheads of global capitalism and neocolonialism. In fact, the largest delegation at COP26 is the fossil fuel lobby. They've got 500 people.
We've seen the amount of wealth that's poured into Glasgow during COP26, but none of that has been felt by the workers throughout the city. Some branch members have been treated incredibly badly by some delegates, which further exacerbates an already overworked, drained workforce throughout COP26, coming off the back of an incredibly stressful experience for people over COVID being frontline workers.
As COP26 drew near, Glasgow's industrial front began to mobilise. At one point, it looked like we were going to have no trains, no cleansing workers, and potentially no buses. And we saw that as a real opportunity to try and build a material link between the labour movement and the climate movement, connecting our shared struggles against exploitation, whether that be exploitation of labour or of our planet's finite resources. On Friday, on the day of our big march, GMB and the cleansing workers joined us.
I didn't think I'd ever be a part of this, but I'm proud to be here today. And I'm proud of these people. It's made this banner for us because the support we have had in the last week has been tremendous.
On Friday and Saturday, we mobilised 150,000 people from unions to Indigenous communities. We platformed those from the most affected people in areas. That's what we have the power to do when we unite our struggles.
The COP Coalition 26 March, a group of protesters were essentially targeted by the police, kettled or cordoned off. You know, it felt like our right to peaceful assembly was being targeted. And it emphasised this need for us to increase this collaboration within trade unions and organisations outside of that.
Let them go! Let them go! Let them go! Let them go! Let them go!
We demand a system that prioritizes human need, not profits for the big corporations. We want a society that makes our lives better and easier.
A just transition that puts workers' rights absolutely at the centre of the new model. Many of the industries that we have membership will have to change. And we have to take responsibility for that as trade unions. In the tourism sector, we know, for instance, that aviation has a very direct impact on the climate. It's our membership in agriculture that's very much at the front line of the crisis. If plantations are destroyed, the male workers stay on to restore the plantation. The women who were working in the pack house are all laid off because there's no bananas to pack. In the tea industry, the tea bushes, because of the increase in heat, are not giving as many leaves. The workers, and it's nearly 85% women, can't pick as many tea leaves. Their wages are decreasing. Every year, agricultural workers die from dehydration, chronic renal failure that's really affecting sugarcane workers. It's the damage caused to kidneys by workers in too hot environments for too long. Often no access to potable water in their workplace. That's something that we need to think about in hospitality as well. In some countries, people are being asked to do very heavy jobs in a climate that's very hot. I think also it's important that we do talk about COVID in this meeting. Recovery has to be built on decent work in the sector and a sector that respects the planet. One of the theories is that it came from animals, and the destruction of habitat is going to release more and more of those viruses. Arguing for a model of food production that respects the planet and respects workers has to be at the centre of any campaign for climate justice.
The Lucas Centre Space Combine Shop Stewards Committee was formed in the late 60s. The Combine represented 17 factories, over 14 geographical sites, with 18,000 members and 9 trade unions. The Combine was consolidated by the success of a strike in the Birmingham plants in the UK in the late 60s and early 70s. Jobs were being lost at an alarming rate. The Combine decided to draw up an alternative to the company's corporate plan, a plan to save jobs by making products to fulfil the unmet needs of society. We sent out a questionnaire to all our colleagues, asking them to come up with product ideas, and we had 150 product ideas come back. Designs for wind turbines, heat pumps, solar energy initiatives, hybrid cars, electric cars, Road rail vehicles were all part of an integrated transport system. We had a section in the plan for medical equipment, which included portable kidney dialysis machines and redesigns for iron lungs. Oceanics, such as submersibles for exploring the seabed, and the list went on. We insisted the methods of manufacture should also ensure our members' skills were developed and maintained, including apprenticeships and a call for more female engineers. The Financial Times described the Lucas plan as one of the most radical alternative plans ever drawn up by workers for their company. The workers, supported by academics, were proven right. The management and the Labour government and many of the trade union establishments were wrong. They rejected the plan that products such as hybrid engines, wind turbines, solar technology, heat pumps, all commonplace now and largely manufactured overseas.
Unite members in GKN this year have done the same thing, where they've created a plan themselves about moving from the production they are to a environmentally sustainable production, and they've created that plan alongside the union. And I think this is where we need to go within every industry, including hospitality.
In the Green New Deal workshop, we were talking about radical changes that we can make across our industry. Works councils is one example, and actually having workers at the heart of the business. I work at the SEC, where COP is being held, one of the largest hospitality workplaces in Scotland. What we have is the Compass UK and Ireland Works Council. The fact that I hadn't heard of it in the place that I've worked for 8 years now speaks volumes. And as far as I'm aware, the SEC did not have a representative until now. We're looking at securing the real living wage for staff and also bearing to engage with real union access across the venue. And hopefully the beginning of the end of zero-hour contracts. That's not to say that like a Works Council format is the answer to everything. I am still pretty sceptical. You know, the real power lies with the workers that are on the ground, that are in the workplace, that are coming together.
Not changing your towels, not changing your sheets, not having your room cleaned. All of these are claims that the big hotel chains are making, claiming to customers that they're defending the planet. But we all know that this is just greenwashing.
Before, we used to clean the rooms every day, and now they only call us to clean the checkout rooms. We need to wait for a call and see whether they need us or not. That's not fair. We do not have a schedule.
As the climate is changing, things are becoming tougher to source, tougher to afford as well. So we can't be living on such small wages anymore.
That lack of security, you don't have a secure wage, and you also don't have much security in your housing situation either. In line with that, we're in discussions to become an affiliate to Living Rent, Scotland's tenants union, in line with other affiliates such as the GMB cleansing workers. So there's huge potential there to share our skill sets and our resources and fight for a fair hospitality city and a fair society as a whole.
The Fair Work Convention is made up of trade unions and employers and local authorities. We're doing a hospitality inquiry to expose the inequalities, the unfairness and all the zero-hour contracts, poverty pay, etc., that hospitality workers suffer, and then look to how can we make it better.
Also, we're here to talk about the Fair Hospitality Charter, a real living wage regardless of age, paid rest breaks, paid transport past 12 a.m, no unpaid trial shifts, proactive sexual harassment policy, minimum hour contracts, consultation on rota changes, 1 week in advance, 100% tips, trade union access agreements.
No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace.
I've been with the company for 5 years and I've seen how very slowly they strip back different types of benefits that you have with working with the company, clocking back on times, the unpaid trial shifts. There wasn't any intention for welfare as well, working late hours, long hours. In 2018, we started the new year to find out that we were going to have 40% of our car tips cut, active as of the Monday after finding out on Friday. Tips are so important is because it can be like 50% on top of your own wages, which are minimum wage. So we unionised. That was the first time actually I ever encountered what a union was and could feel what benefit that they could bring us as well, and the voice that they could provide us with. We approached Unite the Union and we found that actually there'd been a campaign running for a number of years around this, and this is practiced across the hospitality industry. We went on strike, we had picket lines in London and Manchester and Milton Keynes and other places. We also worked closely with Wetherspoons and Muck Strikers, with Uber Eats, because we were all suffering these difficulties. And eventually we managed to pass a law. We were heard by the government, which was absolutely incredible. It's taken a while, but as of this year, in hospitality in general, they can no longer take tips from waiting staff.
We have to fight so that we get work. Every day, the company is trying to reduce our hours, and they try to overload us with work. We had 40 rooms per person, 37 checked out rooms and 7 occupied rooms. The person died after doing all that work. Luckily, we managed to create a union. We got together, we showed how sick and tired we were of them from crushing us. And that's why today we have a good contract with 16 rooms. If anybody's afraid of joining a union, please do not be afraid. This is the protection we have as workers.
What do we want? Safe home. Where do we want it? Now. What do we want? Safe home. Where do we want it? Now. We're here outside Grand Central, which is the Intercontinental Hotel Group's flagship hotel in Glasgow, because this is a multi-billion-pound hotel chain that still refuses to pay for staff transport home after midnight. One of our members was sexually assaulted walking home 3 months ago because this company promised that they would pay for a taxi home and they didn't deliver on that promise. So we are here to send a message to one of the biggest hotel groups in the country. The bare minimum that you should be doing is paying for transport home, paying the real living wage of £10 an hour, and get rid of 0-hour contracts. In some cases, they're being paid £6.50 an hour, and they're not even getting the hours that they need to live.
They promised during the Olympics to become the first company in the hotel sector to pay the living wage. This was 10 years ago. Do they pay the living wage? No, they don't.
A company like IHG can afford to pay for the transport of the workers that make them their profits. During the pandemic, they still made £660 million. Even though their hotels were shut, they chose to make 95% of the workforce in there redundant. We need companies like IHG to realise that worker safety extends out of the workplace and it entails us to taxis home.
Hey, IHG, get the workers home for free.
9 out of 10 hospitality staff have experienced sexual harassment at work, and 50% of them said that the perpetrator were clients and customers. In Chicago, 58% of the hotel workers and 77% of the casino workers have been sexually harassed by a guest. 49% of the housekeepers had a guest expose themselves or flash them. In Cambodia, workers have been physically assaulted, sexually harassed, and had hot drinks thrown in their face. And the worst part is that there is no consequences for the abusive customers, and that management told the workers that nothing can be done, that it's part of the job, and that the workers should apologize.
In Norway, we made a campaign together with all these institutions called Draw the Line. We need to set up some standard operating procedures. How do we deal with it? How to report it, how to follow it up. And violation has to have a consequence, has to lead to a consequence.
On June 2019, Convention 190 and Recommendation 206 were adopted by the international labor community, made of ILO member states, the UK, for instance, the workers and employers organization. It's up to the employer to make sure that the workplace is safe for everybody and not to exclude women from working at night, for instance, because it's too dangerous for them. Article 9 of the convention requires employers to negotiate with trade unions a workplace policy on violence and harassment. So far, the IAF has signed 7 agreements. In the hotel sector, there are 3 of them, Accor Invest, Melia, and EU.
One of the things that we've done in the Works Council is implement the Dignity at Work campaign, or training should I say, which will be rolled out across all campus venues, which looks at sexual harassment, bullying, and has a formal complaints procedure, for which I think we can all agree is the absolute baseline for what we should be expecting from an employer.
I'm too tired to fucking smile, pal. Feet blistered and throbbing for some fucking time, pal. Paper cut stinging from chopping fucking limes, pal. And yet you slur. Where's your fucking smile, gal? You know fucking what? I'll tell you where it is, pal. I left it on my break eating food I had to pay for, pal. I left it on my plate. The last I've ate for hours, pal, and yet you slur. Where's your fucking smile, gal? I smile when staff think my sexuality means I want to rate girls out of 10. These dudes sneer and snigger, I squirm in discomfort yet again. But that's just life, innit? Don't want to be a moany bitch, so here's my fucking smile there, but flickering like a glitch, oh shit. I can hear sniggers from that cluster. Avoid, avoid, avoid with all the energy you can muster. Hey, pretty lady, I like the way you're built. Smile, smile, forget your embarrassment, your guilt. My son thinks you're a gorgeous hen. Just take the compliment and go. Pretend their eyes don't follow you. Do your job, don't put on a show. And so I'm too tired to fucking smile, pal, because I do it all day and all fucking night, pal. And you might not be the worst of them, but my patience wears so thin, pal, and yet you slur. Where's your fucking smile, gal? Thank you.
We can only rely on ourselves, our organizations, and our trade unions. And the sooner we realize that, the better. Climate justice here and globally won't happen unless workers make it happen. And we do that the way we always have, with mass demonstrations, strikes, and civil disobedience to shut their system down.
Reminds us that climate action is not an isolated it's oh okay I've got to turn the light on, sorry. Oh, there we go. Okay. Yeah. So it's not an isolated thing, but it has to be looked at in the broader picture of all the other issues that we face and challenges that we face in our lives. I went to COP26 and it was the most amazing experience being there amongst all that energy and people from all over the world that were concerned. And one of the most impressive things I saw there was Stop Ecocide had a whole program of events going on, and they were campaigning to basically make ecocide against the law in the international court. And they've had recent great success with that, and I read you, mass destruction of nature reaches International Climate Court. This is September the 9th. And as Pacific Island states propose recognition of ecocide as international crime. That's taken years to get to that. On October the 9th, Azerbaijan's parliament has passed the first reading of a bill that would introduce the crime of ecocide into the country's criminal code. So the fact that that happened in September, we're now hoping we'll see an avalanche of other countries wanting to get on board and make ecocide a crime, so that if you destroy something willfully in nature, you actually pay for it. Because at the moment, you can pretty much do what you like a lot of the time and get away with it. Like if a tanker ship kills a blue whale in the Pacific Ocean, where's the comeback? There isn't one. It's inconvenient, and that's it. Actually, that should be a crime, should it not? You know, because I think the blue whale, quite apart from all the other things it does, is harvest vast amounts of carbon from the atmosphere into its skin. It's actually a carbon reservoir. It's doing us a good turn there. But if you destroy it, there's no penalty. The next people to come up and talk to us are Young Somerset, I'm very pleased to say. And here comes Francesca Little. And I'm going to try and line up their film. So how many, would you like chairs, Francesca? Are other people going to come up? You're going to stand? How's it going to work? Where you go? I'll try and get the film ready.
Right. I'll stay gone in 10 years. Well, you don't go anywhere, but I mean, I won't be gone. I mean, I'll really have to go underground.
So there it is. Dan, should I be 24 screen? Let's try that. Yeah, okay. That's ready to go, hopefully, when you are.
So good evening, everyone. For those of you who have not seen me before, my name's Frankie. I work for Young Somerset, and my role at Young Somerset is the Participation and Inclusion Lead. So it's my job to amplify the voices of young people and to advocate for them in spaces like this, to make sure that their voice is heard and is listened to. And I think it's really, really important. Young people stand at the forefront of the fight against climate change, and they are the leaders of tomorrow, and they are the change makers of today. I'm really excited that we were able to bring this clip together from a group called the Young Rangers. So the Young Rangers is a Young Somerset scheme, and it's an opportunity for young people aged 12 to 16, and it's based up on the Quantock Hills. They learn simple conservation skills, woodland management, wildlife surveying, amongst lots of other kind of outdoor skills. And the natural environment is where they thrive. And we see those young people really coming out of their shell, engaging with our youth workers and engaging with each other in the natural environment. And we asked them what their opinions on climate change were and their thoughts and feelings. So I'm going to stop talking and let you watch the video.
We are determined to make our voices heard and drive meaningful change. Every action counts. We are determined to make our voices heard and drive meaningful change. Every action counts.
We can encourage other young people to be sustainable by teaching them more about how to recycle and use things again and not just get rid of them after the first time.
I think that adults and businesses need to help to raise awareness about what climate change is and the effect that it's having on our planet, and should help motivate a lot of people to do something about it. And if they also talk about the different ways that climate change can be mitigated, looking at the small things, that if everybody does, it will help.
It's mostly about reducing the pollution that they may cause, because when adults are driving their cars from 5 meters down the road, you know, it's wasteful and it's inconsiderate of future generations. And for businesses, when they have big cranes filled with so much stuff that they need to carry from one place to another, there are ways of doing it with a more eco-friendly mindset. And that's what's important, because even selfishly, if you are running a big business, like a multi-million-dollar business, or multi-million-pound business, being eco-friendly even in itself can be profitable, because people see that and think this is a good company and it helps people. So even if selfishly you're just doing it for the money, that's still a good reason to be eco-friendly and help climate change, because it's stupid to not want to help people in the future, because that's what everything is for at the end of the day, helping future generations.
I'm worried about what the future generation will endure. I'm also worried about that there will be famine and droughts, which will cause food shortages for all around the world, which will then result in third world countries having less food and the population's decreasing because of this.
Our future is at stake. The decisions made today will shape the world we inherit tomorrow.
Speak to you to kind of really emphasise young people's voices in their space. So come on up, let's do a swap.
So, hello, my name is James Lawson and I'm a member of Somerset Youth Parliament, and I'll move to the side. So Somerset Youth Parliament's job is to run a campaign. So that campaign is, there's 3 members of Somerset Youth Parliament. The campaign can be about anything you're passionate about, and I'm passionate about climate change and the environment. So my campaign is titled Young People and the Fragile Environment. And for a basic roundup of that campaign, it mainly involves, firstly, action. So I've already been to a protest in London called Restore Nature Now, where over 100,000 people attended. I've also been to other events which I recognise some people here from. It's also about social media campaigns. So I've created a YouTube channel, which I've not uploaded anything yet, but there'll be films where people can access different information about climate change. There's also a website that I'm building where people will be able to access community events in Taunton. And also today I'm going to be speaking about the impact of climate change on young people, because climate change is going to impact young people the most. So the first impact is on young people's mental health. Suicide and anxiety rates are going sky high, and so are rates of global temperature rises. But decision makers fail to recognise that. They try and blame other things, even though they know that climate change and anxiety correlates. Furthermore, other issues, young people are constantly feeling worried, and because people say they don't care about climate change, I hear the question, do young people care about climate change far too often? And everybody feels worried about climate change because essentially people aren't going to be able to get the jobs they want. They're going to have to get jobs to try and save themselves. You may have wanted to be a lawyer, a naturalist, a politician. All we want to do is survive because our world's in that sort of state. Young people feel powerless as well. Too many of our warnings have been ignored. Many people in Key Stage 1 don't even know who Greta Thunberg is. Many large firms like Barclays banks and governments like the Qatari government, Saudi Arabia, love to cover up all the action that we do because they make profits from fossil fuels. But what we should be doing is making profits from sustainable things. So if we look to companies like Triodos, which is a bank, and they invest in sustainable solutions. For example, and also Ecosia, they invest in sustainable solutions. So over 20 million people use Ecosia. A lot less use Triodos, but both are turning over millions of pounds. Ecosia is nearly turning over £1 billion, and all of this goes into sustainable action. Ecosia is a search engine that plants trees. So you search, and so I think you have to search 40 times, and then a chunk of the ad revenue goes into planting trees. And the trouble is, big firms like Barclays and governments, as I said before, like to cover up all of this because they're making profits from fossil fuels. But if we start to tax those companies more and tax the companies that are having a big impact on the planet less, then maybe we can actually make some meaningful change. And when people look for the impacts of climate change on young people, they often say it's just living without oil and gas, but it's a lot bigger than that. We have already seen in 50 years 2 million deaths and $4 trillion worth of damage due to extreme weather. And this is just a snapshot of what is to come. Because in the future, we can't predict how many deaths there are going to be. But all the scientists are saying it will go probably above 1 billion deaths in the next 100 years. Massive number of people in high-income countries don't want refugees to come to our country. But what do we expect refugees to do when their countries are being damaged by our actions? We often criticise the capitalist view, but maybe we need to take something from their view, even if we don't fully agree from it. We need to try and make profit from sustainable solutions, because not everybody's going to agree with our view that workers should have most of the rights. But if the rich people can benefit from climate change, then maybe we can take everybody, because change needs to be appealing for everybody. We can't just say, you have to have this view. We need to incorporate everybody's views and try and create a solution that works for everybody. so every young person, me, my friends, my classmates, can grow up in a safe place. Thank you.
Okay. If you don't mind, I'm just going to follow up from James, really. Hi, everyone. For those that probably don't know me, my name's Lara Martin. I've been part of Youth Parliament now, God, since I was younger than James's age. So I've got to be at least 8 years going on now. And I've come to sort of follow up on points, talk a bit more about what we do, and kind of I'm thinking more in depth of what you said. Essentially, I've been doing work for the past 8 years, mostly centered around the climate stuff. I've been playing a huge role from being part of the advisory group. So like James said, we have 3 main members. They each lead their campaigns. We have a deputy when there's space available, when someone's available. And that was what I took for part of my role for about 2 years or so during the previous climate campaigner, Oban Mackey, during his campaign. And then since then, now I've come to adulthood, although I can surely say that I'm probably around the age of your children or grandchildren, sorry to be presumptuous. But although I'm coming to like early adulthood, I'm still seeing the effects that I was struggling with when I was younger and with the previous campaign. All of the stuff we were raising back then is still developing and shifting to be more of a problem now and needs to be heard more than ever, which is why I'm so happy to be here and talk. I'll try and summarize this quickly, but some of the work I've done in the previous couple of years has been a key point in all of that was when the previous climate strategy came out for the council, for Somerset Council. We read through it and we were sort of like, Youth Parliament as a whole was involved with really small bits. It was like, we're doing the climate strategy, we're like trying to make something, we'd like your input, was maybe mentioned twice. And then by the point that it was properly mentioned and brought to us, we couldn't really do a lot about it because it was too close to actually being finalised. So our voice wasn't really being put forward. Like Frankie was saying before, it's really important for us as a group to make sure young people's voices are heard. And so when the council brought this so late to us, it made it really difficult to work on together. After one of our members lobbying this, talking to and then publishing an article about it and how we felt left out, it was almost a complete 180. So I'd argue one of the best things I've done during Youth Parliament, where we eventually led to a climate summit, where we had a strategy meeting over 2 events, invited young people, a bit similar to this, but it was over Zoom because COVID and whatnot, and essentially sat young people down and asked, are you worried about the environment? Where does this come up in your life? And sort of worked on a solution, and even had our current MP at the time, Rebecca Powell, involved. This is the main sort of source of evidence I can show to people in groups like this that young people care. Me and James wouldn't be here today, obviously, if we didn't care. And I just think it shows up so much in young people's lives. The stuff that's already been mentioned today, transport. Today, I'm getting here by taxi and getting home by taxi. I live on Exmoor in the middle of nowhere, and I have to drive to get to the nearest bus. I have to drive to get to the nearest shop. And as a young person, I'm happy to do that because I'm lucky enough to have parents that can drive me around. But the cost on the climate is huge. I'm living in a gorgeous natural area and then thinking about my route home, how much that the emission is going to affect the area I'm living in. It feels a bit backwards. And I know I'm not the only young person that feels this, because during those meetings, this is the key stuff that was coming up. It was the transport, how our buses and our train systems are sort of bent backwards to make young people pay more, make young people use them less, which causes us to have to rely on parents to drive or get driving licenses like myself. And sort of looking at litter as well, even in schools, everywhere. And we weren't taught enough about it, or I'd argue I wasn't when I was growing up through school. And part of the work James, I'd argue, is doing and helping with as well is changing the perspective in schools, because we're kind of starting where the young people are, having those conversations of we're what's left. A point where the people in these rooms, I'm sad to say, may be long gone unless we find some cure for aging. When we're at that point, what do we do? How do we fix all of this? And it's such a big thing that it causes all that anxiety. So I think to kind of round up all of that, my point today is that young people care. We're here. In fact, we're participating in the running of the Somerset Sustainable Futures event in November. which is on the 26th of November, where students from years 5, 6, and 7 and 9 will join throughout the day. They get involved with some sustainability-themed activities and talks. In addition, there's hopefully interactive exhibitions from various companies showcasing what kinds of jobs and careers are available in these eco-friendly and sustainable industries. We're trying to get more and more young people involved and looking at this from a different point of view. And that's, again, why I'm so happy to be here today. The last thing I think I'll kind of mention to round it up, if you want to chat to either of us on the break, you're more than welcome to whilst we're still here. But if you really want to find out more about us, I 110% recommend our website. It is literally Somerset Youth Parliament, I believe it's .co.uk. And that's where we post articles and all the stuff we're doing, like that event coming up. And it's where you can find more information on all of the members and what we do. Thank you for listening to both of us today.
Thank you so much, James and Lara and Francesca, for bringing it all together and for showing us the film. Really inspiring. And I hope that perhaps on behalf of everybody, today has also, perhaps for you, given you perhaps a little bit of more insight into the kind of work that the trades councils do across the UK, and perhaps invite you to consider the Youth Parliament at some point getting together with the Trades Council for a debate about these kinds of issues. We would really welcome that if that would work for you, because obviously the trade union movement is a terrific reservoir of talent, wisdom, and accrued knowledge and experience and resources that can be brought to bear on, and is already being brought to bear, as the film showed, on the issues that we're facing. But I just thought I'm going to ask for another round of applause because I thought you were amazing. Okay, we've got a very short break now, so there's food and drinks, and we'll come back and we will hear from. We're going to hear from Gawain Little, I believe. Yeah, that's right.
How long is the break?
10 minutes. 10 minutes, everyone. 10 minutes.
He can carry that off, can't he? I wish I'd moved this
Ready?
Still gonna close. Shall we? Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Wait, yeah.
Just going to move it for a moment. Ladies and gentlemen, so we're restarting. Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to, I'll tell you what, just before I introduce our next speakers, there's a piece of paper here and a pen, old technology. If anybody feels that we might not already have your email address at Bridgwater and District Trades Unions Council, please put your details on here and you can be added to the general mail outs that go out, and you would be very, very welcome to attend our meetings. The next one is next week. Dave Chappell here is our secretary, and it's on Tuesday of next week at the Shack.
Yeah, I mean, could I just say that our trade union group isn't just about organising people in workplaces and getting people together in workplaces. It's also about campaigning on all things that matter to everybody, whether you're 1 year of age or 101. Otherwise, we wouldn't be putting this on, would we? So, don't just think, trade union, I'm not in work or whatever. We put this on because we want to campaign as well as organise workplaces.
Thank you, Dave. So I'll pass this round. If I've just hand it to Theo for a minute and then obviously pass it on. Thank you very much. So it's my pleasure to introduce from Bridgwater Town Council, who do so much to support the town. And from my perspective, being part of Somerset Film in the Engine Room, their commitment to cultural regeneration of Bridgwater is a terrific thing and to be much commended. It's my pleasure to introduce, to talk about the town hall and the greening of the town hall, councillors Tim Mander and Kathy Pierce.
Thank you for inviting us tonight. It's a really good event and quite inspiring. Tim and I are Westover town councillors, so that's this part of town, because our other Westover councillor, Brian Smedley, who I expect most of you, if not all of you know, couldn't come tonight because he's got another engagement. But we're here to talk about what the town council has been doing over the past few years around climate emergency, our current projects and what we're aiming to do in the future. So for us, it really started in 2019, and in the spirit of what Phil was saying earlier, whilst we were waiting for the big decisions to be made, big global decisions, we decided we need to do something locally and things that we had control over, just sort to make a start. So, unlike many other councils in 2019, we declared a climate emergency. Bearing in mind that at that time we weren't really responsible for an awful lot. We had the town hall, Trinity Hall, and cemeteries. So, but nevertheless, we thought it was there were things that we could do. So the first thing we did was introduce a single-use plastics policy. So we looked at what plastics we were using in the town council operations, what other materials we were using, and so we stopped the sort of automatic buying of new plastic containers full of stuff. So we started refilling, and we also sourced local suppliers where we could. So we brought it sort of really local. And we started obviously buying sort of recycled paper. We've gone paper free in certain of our departments where we used to have paper invoices and stuff like that. That's all done digitally now. So at the time, it was not everybody was doing this, but of course it's law now. So it did feel like we were sort of part of the movement to bring that about. Lots of people doing the same thing wanting the same thing, and then it becomes law. The next thing we did was we introduced a pesticide-free policy. That was just for our cemeteries at that time, but it was a change, because the previous council who'd been managing the cemeteries were using glyphosate and all sorts of things, but we decided we didn't want that anymore, so we are now pesticide-free on all our land.
Do you mean herbicide and pesticide?
Yes. The other thing we did, because Bridgewater has a really low tree cover in terms of nationally and Europe-wide. At the time, it was about 7% compared to about 13% nationally. So we introduced a tree fund. Because we didn't have a lot of land ourselves, we invited people to put in requests for where they would like trees on public land. It wasn't about putting trees in their own gardens. So that lasted for a couple of years, and I think we had about 90 trees or so under that scheme. And we introduced back in 2019, it was our first Seed the Day vegan fair and market. I'll now hand over to Tim, who'll talk about decarbonising our buildings and our transport forum, and then I'll go on about the other things that we've also got underway at the moment.
Just before you go on, it's interesting to talk about trees and how few trees there are in Bridgewater.
Yeah.
We bought a shop, my wife and I, in Eastover. We run the bicycle workshop.
Yeah.
And there was one tree in Eastover, and it was where the Mercure wanted to extend their hotel. And they just cut it down one day. And that tree had a trunk. You can still see it there now. The stump is still there. And they just did that very cynically, just cut it down. Is it not time to actually go around, and the few trees that do remain, actually to somehow put an order on them that you cannot just cut down a tree just because you want to build another hotel, part of a hotel. And it was really sickening. Both my wife and I were rather gutted when we walked in to our shop, and that tree had been cut down.
Yeah.
And it was the only tree. Now we are getting another one tree as part of the celebration mile. We look forward to seeing that tree. Wish we were getting more, but yeah, it was really sad. So do think about how do you stop developers just violently removing
Well,
trees.
that is a real toughie to do that. That's why we tried to reintroduce some trees in a way that we could, in a way that we had power over as a council. So, I mean, I grew up in the town, and the south part of the town. I remember cherry trees all over Hamp, and one by one, one by one. Oh, no, you didn't.
Trees down.
Yes.
Yeah, there's just loads of trees, and there's some really old cherry trees in Sydenham by me and Chamberlain. They blew down in the storm. I asked the council to replace them. They replaced them with some things that never ever lived. They replaced them in the middle of the drought in June. And the trees never took.
You know, it's really frustrating, and some of the requests that we had were on highways land, and that proved impossible for us to put trees back on that land, which is why we're changing our approach slightly, which I'll go on to later on. But you know, I share your frustration, and we do what we can, but especially with developers and what have you, it's real tough. But you know, there's other ways of getting trees back, and that's what we're aiming to do. Tim,
Councillor for 15 years. I mean, there are tree preservation orders of TPO.
Yes.
And ordinary members of the public can request from the council a TPO be
Yeah,
put
absolutely.
on a single tree or a group of trees in your area. You need more members of the public to realise how easy it is to get a TPO. And once a tree preservation order is put on it, it is much more difficult for somebody to cut it down without prosecution of some kind. So I mean, it is in place, but most people, as you know, they're not told about
No, you're right.
things they can do. Using their powers.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that.
Right. Anyway, obviously, Kath's covered the initial. I think the important point was, I think it was in 2019, as Kath said, the town council recognised the importance of the climate crisis, particularly, and really took a view on what it could do to improve things within its own control. And obviously, one of the things we looked at is our own operations, how we operate, the buildings we occupy, what could be done to improve, to reduce internal emissions from our operations, and also, look at the energy we burn and how that could be improved or reduced in terms of our carbon footprint. Sorry, yeah, okay. So one of the things is we looked at is energy efficiency. Energy efficiency. We've upgraded all our lighting within all our buildings. We replaced existing lighting with energy efficient LED lighting to reduce carbon emissions. Just out of interest, LED bulbs produced I think 570 million tons of carbon emissions in 2017. As an incandescent light burns through 50 watts of electricity per hour, whereas an LED light bulb uses only 6 watts per hour. So that's a substantial saving in terms of the usage of power. So we've changed all our lights where we can to LED. The second thing we did, an important thing, is in terms of the installation of photovoltaics, which obviously is people, I'm sure they know it captures sun's energy and converts it into electricity. And what we've done so far is we've got a small unit down Friar Avenue where we've put 20 solar panels on it, and that's now got an annual output of 7,188, and it stores 17.4 kilowatts per day on the battery, or battery storage there. So we can use that to power that building and also do some charging, some electric vehicles. Not all of it, but it helps. Now, the town hall, for people who are aware, recently probably seen the scaffolding outside. It's still there today. We just installed 112 solar panels there, and that will generate 42,227 kilowatts, I think, per annum. We haven't as yet installed batteries, but they will be retrofitted there. In terms of cost, the panels at the unit down at Friar Avenue was £17,436, which we totally funded. The town hall PVs have cost circa 90,000, which includes not just the PVs but scaffolding. We're fortunate. We got a grant from Somerset Council, which covers 75,000 from their Climate Emergency Community Grant Fund. But we've also obviously matched, or we've provided additional funds to pay for the whole system. So as an example here, I can just show you what the difference has been. In 2021. Bridgewater Town Hall had an annual electricity usage of 117.72 kilowatts and emitted 88 tons of electricity carbon dioxide. And the annual cost of town hall electricity in 2021 was in region 19,000. By installing photovoltaics with the current system, we will reduce the town hall annual consumption by 71%. So that goes to show how much, it makes economic sense to do this sort of work as well. It's not just saving the planet, but there's a good case, economic case for doing this. Well, exactly. But I mean, sometimes you've got to make that argument to get through to people who are deniers or skeptics, I would say. We've got 4 other buildings which we've had some feasibility works done, and that's going to be the next stage, which includes recreation up on Road Lane in Hamp, Trinity Hall, St Mary Street, Blake Museum, and the Art Centre as well. Limited the Art Centre because of the listing of the building, but we're looking to eventually install panels in all those buildings, which will help, generally makes sense again, economic sense, if nothing else. And what we've achieved in the town hall particularly is we've actually removed all gas from the building. It was gas-fired central heating. It's gone. It's been stripped out. The old radiators are being reused elsewhere. There's a good market for them. But the point is, we've achieved, we decarbonised that building now, which is something we probably thought a few years ago we never achieved, but we've done that. And we saved a lot of money by doing it. So, that I think that's a great thing. In terms of our electricity supply, we're actually switched now to one of the major green electricity suppliers. So, we buy in green. The electricity you consume is from, wind and solar, renewable energy. And I just think this is an example of how even a fairly small council can actually do its own bit, make not just the environmental case, but a financial case to actually move away from carbon and start, and really support renewables. That's what we do. Oh yeah, yeah. And another thing is moving away from that side of the building side. As a council, we've been supporting. We're a strong supporter of transport, public transport, which is buses, trains, and obviously active travel as well. We have a transport forum that meets 4 or 5 times a year, and we've really supported those forms of transport. So, hopefully to get people to move away from car usage or dependency on cars. And I know that one of the young speakers earlier mentioned the problems with lack of buses. And obviously we are, as a council, we'll be supporting the franchising of bus services in Somerset. There is a proposal, and that's something we will strongly support. Whether it will come to fruition, I don't know. But again, only about 18 months ago, we produced a plan of all the active travel routes in and around Bridgwater. And it's incredibly, I know it's an old paper-based thing that some people think we ought to move away from, but actually it's been incredibly successful and very popular. And that was, we did that with help of the Bridgwater Area Cycling Campaign. But so as a community-based group, we worked together and we produced this plan, which people have come to us and they're collected and they're using, and they're able to sort of see there are routes around town. You can get from across town without having to go on the major roads, so people can feel confident and comfortable walking and cycling around the town. Okay.
Thanks, Tim. There are obviously many strands to this thing, and 18 months or so, Bridgwater Town Council took back direct control of its allotments. They were leased out to an association, but because we wanted to show our commitment, the lease was coming to the end, so we wanted to show our commitment and our support of growing your own vegetables, encouraging people to grow their own vegetables, and that's going really well. I'm sure many of you know about the problems at Somerset Council at the moment, and so the Town Council a few months ago took over responsibility for all our parks and open spaces and cleaning our streets. And just picking up on what our friends from the Youth Parliament were saying about litter, we will be introducing more recycling bins, and previously the recycling bins the stuff didn't get recycled because it was contaminated with non-recyclable stuff. But we will be doing our own in-house sorting, so the things that are put in the recycling bins will be recycled. But we took control of the parks and open spaces, or management of them at the moment. We don't actually own them at the moment. But from what I was saying before about the pesticide-free policy, when it was just the cemeteries, it was important to us, but it didn't make a huge difference town-wide. Now we are managing the parks and open spaces. That policy is in place for those spaces. And also we'll be increasing the perennial planting, so there'll be less reliance on annuals, which you've got to tear out every year. It's such a waste. And also wildflower areas. And we also manage the meads. I hope most all of you know where the meads is. It's an area of wetland grazing meadow, which is public open space, but that's managed very sensitively. The importance it makes is by doing that throughout the town, we really hope to be able to create sort of like wildlife corridors, so that sort of that link up to each other across the town, and also to neighbouring towns and villages as well. In terms of reducing food waste, the town council supports the South Bridgewater Pantry, which is based up at Recreation on Road Lane. So that's we get donations from Morrison's, and other supermarkets are available, and also FareShare, which bring us fruit and vegetables each week, and we feed into a Bridgewater-wide food group where we can share food. So if one group has got a glut of a certain thing, then we put the message out, and then we can move it around, and vice versa. Tim's already mentioned the electric vehicles that we have, but we've also got a salary sacrifice scheme for electric cars and for bikes to encourage those modes of transport for our staff. We've also changed to more ethical investments, and so we don't invest our funds in tobacco, oil or arms. And finally, through all the things that we do, we've built up strong connections with various organisations that work across the town, and that is Seed of Hope, which is a horticultural based organisation. We work with them really closely on the Meads, but there's lots of other projects going on. Centre for Sustainable Energy, we sort of facilitated and worked with them for them to provide their drop-ins to help people avoid fuel poverty and access grants and what have you. People like the Men's Shed and Inland Waterways Association. So that's what we've been doing over the last few years, but it's an evolving thing, and this is ongoing for us. So for the future, we're acutely aware that we haven't set up a climate forum, but being at this gathering tonight makes me think there's quite a few people here that might be part of that when we do. We haven't actually got a strategy. We just went ahead and started doing things, but at some point we really should, to have a sort of focus for the future, a strategy. We have just begun working on a food policy, and so I really hope the outcome of that is that we will not be buying any intensively produced food, which does such a lot of harm to the environment. And part of that policy, no, not in its entirety, will be plant-based foods. And I think that's it, actually. So we will be continuing our decarbonisation and our planting. There, that's it. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you. Lucy. Oh.
Thank you so much to Councillor Tim Mander and Councillor Kathy Pearce. How lucky we are to have such an active council that supports so many great things in the town and is doing wonderful work. So, and we have benefited massively from the town council support. In fact, it was Tim who found us this building originally, so he's to blame. Okay, so yes,
Lucy.
Yeah, thank you. It's really great to hear, in a nutshell, everything you're doing. And I know Town Council's great, a very proactive, active organisation that's doing loads for the town.
Is there a butt coming?
So I list your strategy. Things that really, really frustrate me is the level of idling in this town. And I know that's not your problem, but it is your problem because in your town, and whether there could be some sort of communication campaign that educates people of Bridgewater against idling would be wonderful. But perhaps another one is, it really frustrates me when I go into a small retailer and they say, I always take my bag, they always say, would you like a bag? Could we just change their language and simply say, have you got a bag? Because it's such a simple change of language and it's such a simple communication, I think, maybe it's not, but for the town council to come up with a campaign which perhaps involves a human being walking into shops and saying, can you train your staff perhaps to say this? Are you aware that single-use bags
Yeah,
are great?
yeah.
Because the small ones are free, aren't they?
Yeah.
I don't get them anymore. But, it's such a small change of language. And every time I think no, like with a little bit of an edge to my voice to try and get the message across, but I'm powerless really in that.
Well, I think the idling is I mean, there was a campaign of a couple of years back, wasn't there, about that with stickers and everything. But maybe that's something that the Transport Forum can take up.
Yeah, indeed. I'm going to rush you on.
And with
because
the bags, we have a town team, and we work with the Chamber of Commerce, so we'll raise it through them.
Just a question from what you said, a salary sacrifice scheme.
Oh yes, don't ask. Oh gosh, well, it encourages people to lease electric cars or lease bikes, and it's all to do with the tax that you pay on your earnings, isn't it? I think you get I don't know the exact details. It's a national
tax
scheme.
reduction on basically borrowing the money to pay for either the vehicle or bike. It saves personally. I'd say to the person it saves the money, so it's therefore an incentive to do it.
Yeah, well, thank you again.
We'll exit stage left now.
Okay. Yeah,
thank you.
Right on, because we have waiting in the wings on the Zoom, and he's been waiting patiently for a little while now. We have Gawain Little joining us from the National Federation of
General Federation of Trade Unions.
General Federation of Trade Unions, correct. Thank you. Where's Zoom here? Dan, are you going to be with me?
Yeah, all the way along. Nearly there.
It's already there.
It's already started.
Okay. Join. We're already joined back to the meeting. There we are. So now waiting in the waiting room.
Did it say him waiting?
Yes. Going Little. Ready when you are.
And you've got to have a severe reduction in economic activity. I mean, you've got people just to stay at home and don't bother coming out.
We should plan to save the world, Alan.
Well, it is. If you read my letter in the paper this week,
he's on.
Yay.
He's on. He's on.
I don't think they printed it.
Ladies and gentlemen, Gawain Little. Can we hear him?
Really?
No, it's in the first page. But
Just give us a moment. We're just reconnecting your audio, if I may.
I write that every week.
Headphone port.
I'm trying to change the world.
Is the headphone port? No, it's not a headphone port anymore.
He's coming out that
I haven't stopped recently yet.
Gawain, you hearing us okay?
I'm hearing you. Double page.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Volume.
This one. Yeah. Oh, there it is.
There it is.
Okay.
Try again, Gawain.
It's the last letter.
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can on the laptop only at the moment.
Maybe printing my letter. Printed one last week.
Is it something over there?
I don't know. I need a continuous source of audio. Do you want to tell me about your last holiday?
I'll tell you a story. Once upon a time, many, many years ago, in a
I've heard this one.
small town called Norwich,
Oh no.
there was a man called Gawain who really wanted to speak to some people in Richmond
General Federation of Trade
on his magic device they concocted. He was able to speak into his computer, and words could be heard far, far away. Wonderful. Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
So we'll close that window on the right. Gawain, welcome, and thank you so much for waiting patiently in the wings for us. And I'm just going to put you on to a fuller screen if I can. View.
It's the little green one on the left.
Little green one on the left. You sure?
Yes.
Will that do it?
Try it.
Yes, thank you. Little green one on the left works. Okay, here we go.
Lights, Phil.
Lights, Phil.
Lights, yes.
Sorry, Phil.
That's right.
Blimey. Yes.
Go away. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation to join you today. I'm just sorry that I can't be there in person, but wonderful to have the opportunity to join you via video link. Gawain Little, I am General Secretary of the General Federation of Trade Unions, and I just wanted to make a short contribution to what I hope has been a fantastic discussion so far about the nature of climate crisis and the environmental crisis we face, and what we can do about it. As I'm sure you've already heard this evening, the effects of the climate crisis are very real and increasing day by day, from extreme weather events that leave people dead or homeless to the impact on food production and the effect that that's had on living standards, on the recent cost of living crisis, etc., to the rise in sea level, making some areas completely uninhabitable. The reality is that climate change is already impacting people all over the world. According to some, the chance of a temperature rise of 1.5 degrees over the next 5 years is now over 50%. And scientists say that such a rise of that scale would have irreversible effects. But too often we're told either that there is nothing that we can do about these facts, that there's nothing we can do to change, or that the only action we can take is to make individual lifestyle changes. And obviously, these individual changes can make a difference, but the vast majority of CO2 and other greenhouse gas emissions come not from individual consumption, but from global production. It's multinational corporations producing the vast majority of emissions, and it's their behaviour which needs to be changed, either directly or by government regulation and government action. And to give just one example of what can happen when you have an entire country, an entire government and people swing into action on climate change, I think the small island of Cuba provides an absolutely exemplary example of what happens when people mobilize around that real change collectively and together. Cuba is the only country in the world to have met climate change targets ahead of schedule, primarily because in a socialist country, you can direct, if you like, the will of the entire people towards tackling the effects of the climate crisis without having to battle that profit motive. But what can we do where we are to get that kind of change, the scale of change that is needed to tackle the crisis ahead of us? Well, I would look back to history, because history is littered with examples of working people who shifted national, international policy through organising collectively to push back and fight back. From the Chartists and the suffragettes, the campaign for the extension of the vote to all men and women was one in the teeth of determined opposition of people who said either that extending the vote beyond the small select few of landowners would lead to mob rule, or that extending the vote to women would lead to being prey to apparently their inability to make decisions. All nonsense, of course, but the vote was won in the face of that determined opposition by collective organising, mass organising right across the country, or the right to organise at work, to form unions and to take industrial action, going right back to the Tolpuddle martyrs who were deported for their attempts to form a union, deported for the crime of swearing an oath to each other to work together collectively, to today having the right to organise in unions, the right to take collective action, the right to defend our rights, and even now recently starting to win back some of the trade union rights that were taken away from us, although there's a lot more to do on that front. or indeed another example of collective action that bore fruit, winning equal pay legislation, which was won by women workers through their struggle, although still needs to be realised in practice. But all of these examples, I think, show that when people come together collectively, they can win and change on huge national issues. And just the same, I believe that we can, through organising collectively, tackle the challenge posed by the climate crisis. But of course, all of these examples of winning change begin with collective organisation in workplaces and in communities. The most important thing for us to do now is not just the individual actions we can take in terms of tackling the climate crisis, but actually to organise the power that we need to win from the workplace up, from our communities upwards. So my argument would be, and the thing I want to put forward this evening, is that actually one of the key steps for us as trade unionists and activists is to start to build that base within our own workplaces, to elect green reps, to get them trained, to fight for the right for them to be recognised in the workplace, and to make them the hub of a struggle that I think has to take place on two connected fronts. First of all, an industrial campaign to win changes within your own employer, to shift energy use towards renewables, to shift technology, but also to protect and to create skilled jobs in that process at all stages. We must have no more Port Talbots, no more mass redundancies caused by a so-called shift to green technology, which actually, with proper investment, could have created jobs rather than destroyed jobs within that community. There is absolutely no contradiction between tackling the climate crisis and the protection of skilled jobs, except where greedy employers are concerned or unwilling to invest. So taking on that industrial campaign within each of our employers, and it will be different in the service sector from what it looks like in manufacturing or what it looks like in other industrial sectors. But the fact is that in all of our organisations, we can organise and win for that change internally. But at the same time, I think building up that workplace power and building around the idea of electing and winning support for green reps across our workplaces, we can also use that to build a wider political campaign to educate people on the need to put pressure on politicians to shift government action, both in terms of having clearer climate targets and regulation with teeth, which holds companies to account, but also around investment in green technology. I mentioned earlier the impact that the climate crisis and the impact on food production has had on the recent cost of living crisis, one of the main triggers being massive price rises, massive inflation in relation to food. But one of the reasons that in this country the cost of living crisis cuts so deep is a weakness of our productive economy. Over the last 45 years of neoliberal reform in the British economy, we've seen a massive shift away from investment in the productive economy, away from light and heavy industry, away from extractive industries, and into a primarily service-based economy, focusing in particular on financial services. And that has left our economy particularly weak on the supply side, meaning that when that cost of living crisis hit, it cut particularly deep in Britain. It's taken the economy an incredible amount of time for even partial recovery. Now, of course, one of the ways of tackling economic problems like that is through government investment into the economy and through a clear industrial investment strategy. Now, what better opportunity to develop an industrial investment strategy that creates jobs, that helps rebuild the productive sectors of our economy that were destroyed through deindustrialization over the last 45 years? What better way to do that than for investment and development and building in green technology? But I don't believe that that will come from politicians, that it will come from a far-sighted government in office who decides that actually that's the direction we need to take our country in. I believe that politicians will listen to that argument for a proper industrial strategy that involves and is built around investment in green technology in order to hit hard climate targets and start to reverse the damage done. I believe the government will only be one to that when the pressure is put on by working people. So that organisation we do from the workplace up, I believe, is absolutely crucial to winning that. At the end of the day, when it comes to the climate crisis, we can't hide from the facts and bury our heads in the sand. We need to acknowledge the damage that's already been done and the threat that our world is under. But at the same time, we should know that we can act to prevent the climate crisis, and we can win when we act collectively. As the Italian Marxist and anti-fascist Antonio Gramsci said, we need both a pessimism of the intellect to understand the real dangers posed by the climate crisis, but also an optimism of the will. We can win. Thank you.
Well, we've got Gawain with us online. If you've got a minute or two longer, Gawain, have people got immediate questions or anything they want to ask Gawain or comment? Yes.
I don't know if you've got, you can't see me, but that's okay. Have you got a target for green jobs? Have you got numbers that you're wanting to see? Can you hear that?
I can. I mean, I think in terms of targets for green jobs, I think there's a lot of work to be done on building up an industrial plan that looks across the economy and where and at what scale and pace those could be created. But the first place I would go to is the Million Green Jobs campaign launched by the Campaign Against Climate Change. I think there's a lot of initial work that's been done there about how we can start to build for that. But the fact is, we're not even at the early stages of mapping out properly what could be created. And I think it will involve government, it will involve trade unions coming together to start to map out what that would look like in some more detail.
Dave, quick questions, please, everyone. And Dave.
Gwaine, thanks for coming. First visit to Bridgewater Trades Council, Dave Chapel, Gwaine. Hopefully we'll see you in the flesh sometime, but thanks for coming. And, you know, as usual, an intelligent, passionate and thought-provoking talk. Gwaine, there's a discussion in Bridgewater Trades Council and elsewhere about whether the TUC Congress in September came up with policies that were on climate change that were progressive or not. To what extent that Congress takes us forward or backwards or sideways? What's your view?
An interesting, in some ways difficult question, Dave, and so thank you for it. And apologies again that I can't be there in person, but I hope to at some point. I mean, in terms of not just the policies passed at the most recent TUC Congress, but in general trade policy across the trade union at the moment, there are a number of contradictions and a number of tensions in there. There are a number of unions that represent workers in sectors that do contribute to climate change. And for some within those unions, the argument has been we have to protect jobs first and foremost, and that means ensuring that there isn't a ban on further expansion in terms of fossil fuels, that there isn't a ban on further oil drilling, that there isn't a ban on, and again, this will be a controversial topic, but the whole question of the development of further nuclear power. Some see that as a solution to climate change, others see actually it's just shifting the environmental destruction and what you do, and of course nuclear weapons being a huge byproduct of nuclear power. So all of those are tensions and questions within the trade union movement. But as I said earlier, I don't think there is a direct contradiction between job protection of skilled jobs and the creation of skilled jobs and tackling climate change. But I think the only way you will win those in the movement who are, in my mind, stuck in a position of we have to defend these current existing jobs, even at the expense of the planet and of our lives in the long run. The only way you'll shift those people around is when some serious work is done on what green jobs look like, on what that conversion looks like, on how skilled jobs can be shifted across. The same arguments, I think, apply to the arms industry, to nuclear weapons production, etc. And there has been, in the past, there has been work done within, for example, a Lucas plant that was developed about how you can how you can start to convert jobs that are skilled manufacturing engineering jobs, that you can start to convert those away from paths that lead towards environmental or social destruction and towards that socially useful production. Like I say, I think this is a huge opportunity, but we have to make the case that it can be done through job creation and through job conversion, and that it can be done in a just transition without any loss of jobs. And as we make those arguments, I think that's when you'll see a shift in those policies which are maybe less forward-looking than some we might like to see. And I think then you'll see less of a contradiction. I do think as a movement as a whole, we currently have some quite contradictory policies.
Okay, we've got time for one more quick question. Okay, I think the gentleman here was actually first.
Yeah. Hello. Hello, my name's Alan, but the biggest question of all is how to get rid of capitalism, and I haven't heard anything tonight that suggests ways in which we can get rid of it. I mean, global investment, global finance, wheeling and dealing with bloody currencies. I mean, the whole thing is controlled by family dynasties, as you probably know. This whole global finance is controlled by about 20 family dynasties, and I won't name them. If you go to the Oxfam research, you'll see. And there's nothing at the moment that's other than tinkering at the edges. I mean, we've got to have a fundamental change.
I think possibly the perfect point to end on. So I'm glad that you brought that up. The reality is, and I mean, I used the example of Cuba earlier quite intentionally. The reality is what we've seen in terms of this kind of headlong rush towards the destruction of the entire planet and every living thing on it seems, when you step back, seems to kind of defy all explanation, unless you've set up an economic system where the key motivating factor is short-term profit. And that's not about individuals. It's not about individual business owners. It's an entire economic system that is set up that if you don't prioritize short-term profit, your company won't last. In our economic system, if you do things the right way, if you avoid the massive environmental destruction, if you put that investment in, etc. Let's be honest, in a cutthroat economy, if your costs are higher, you'll go out of business and you'll be overtaken by someone who is not thinking of the future, but is thinking of short-term profit. So I would agree that the root of this is in the motivations of our economic system. If you want to see what you've just described, a shift away from an economic system based on profit towards one that is based on the needs of people, both in this country and internationally, and on really satisfying those needs, including the protection of the environment in which we live, then yes, you need a different economic system. But I go back to the argument I made about how we tackle climate change. I think the only way you will win a different economic system is by building the power to deliver it from workplaces and communities upwards, and by presenting an alternative vision. And the first step for many people that we come into contact with in the workplaces, in our local communities, may not be, hey, have you noticed how awful capitalism is? Should we sweep it all away and put in place a new economic system? But if you start to reach people on the question of what's happening in terms of the climate crisis, if you present a vision that there is an alternative, that things could be done differently, then I think step by step people will draw the same conclusion that you clearly have, that the only way you will actually shift that long term, the only way you will get fundamental change is by looking at the whole of our society, the whole of our economy, and building a better society, a better economy in the interest of the people, not of profit.
Gawain Little, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope we'll see you again in the flesh sometime, because this is about the beginning of something tonight. We hope that we'll have teeth and begin to take actions yet to be decided, and we hope you'll be able to join us at some point in that process. Thanks again for coming.
Okay, thank you for the invite.
Okay, so we are, of course, inevitably running rather late, but it's wonderful that everybody's still here, and we've still got time to hear from friends of Seize the Day. and have a drink and a bit more food, and perhaps think about what's going to happen next. I do know that an invitation has gone out from Bridgewater Trades Union Council to workers at Port Talbot to come and address us at a live meeting which will probably be held at the Railway Club, the Shack by the railway station. And that could well be the next opportunity we have to get together and pick up on some of these threads and see what kind of actions we might take.
Well done, Phil.
Okay, thank you all for coming, but don't go away because we've got at least half an hour to listen to music and enjoy some wonderful music.